Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has refused to step down despite being indicted on a series of corruption charges. Netanyahu has rejected fraud allegations against him, calling them politically motivated. Netanyahu has accused the judiciary, police and others of plotting against him. He said it is an attempt to stage a coup against the Prime Minister and topple his government. He has pledged to stay on as interim premier despite potential court dates and intense political pressure. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's rival Benny Gantz has called on the indicted prime minister to resign from his position. Israel's attorney general has charged Netanyahu with bribery, fraud and breach of trust. In Syria, 7 people have been killed and 30 others were wounded by rocket fire from the rebel forces in the northern city of Aleppo. It says a salvo of rockets hit 5 districts of the city, including Salahuddin. The bombardment comes a day after Syrian government troops bombed a refugee center in rebel-held areas, killing 21 people. The violence has effectively shattered a 3-month truce in the area, sponsored by Turkey and Russia. The war in Syria has killed over 350,000 people and displaced millions since it erupted in 2011. In a telephone conversation, President Donald Trump has invited Afghan President Ashraf Ghani for an official visit to the US. Trump thanked Ghani for his cooperation in release of Australian and American academics. Afghan Presidential Palace spokesman Siddiq Siddiqui said Trump emphasized on ceasefire as a precondition for peace talks. Trump said the Afghan government's management and involvement are needed and must begin immediately. Yesterday, the Taliban also freed 10 Afghan soldiers as part of a prisoner exchange with Afghanistan. The Afghan government said the prisoner swap is meant to restart talks with the Taliban. The US says a political settlement in Afghanistan does not mean the violence will end. Speaking at a conference, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Afghanistan Nancy Jackson said groups like ISIS will be in the country to pursue their objectives. It is 2.5 months since talks between the US and the Taliban collapsed. Jackson said a comprehensive peace agreement will enable Afghans to work together to fight common threats. She said Washington acknowledges military power alone will not bring peace to Afghanistan. Early in 2019, the US opened secret talks with the Taliban to withdraw troops from the country. They collapsed in September when President Trump called them off. Internet services have been reopened across Iran after a day-long government-imposed shutdown amid political unrest. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has called on Iranians to share videos documenting the unrest with the U.S. In a tweet, Pompeo said the United States will expose and sanction any abuse inflicted by the Iranian government on the protesters. Iranian officials say internet services will be entirely restored soon. Amnesty International says at least 106 people died in the demonstrations and subsequent security crackdown. Iran disputes the figure without offering its own. Protests erupted across Iran after the government unexpectedly announced a hike in petrol prices. China says it wants to reach a preliminary trade deal with the US, but is not afraid to fight back when necessary. President Xi Jinping said Beijing has been trying to avoid a trade war with the US. Xi Jinping said Beijing wants to work for a Phase 1 agreement on the basis of mutual respect and equality. He made the remarks 2 days after US President Donald Trump complained Beijing has not made sufficient concessions. Trump has threatened higher tariffs on Chinese goods if the country does not make a deal on trade. On October the 11th, Trump announced a Phase 1 deal resolving US grievances on China's trade and currency practices. China has warned the US to stop sailing its warships through the South China Sea, a territory it claims. The China Navy Command spokesman said Beijing has indisputable sovereignty over the islands in the area and their surrounding waters. US Navy spokeswoman Commander Ran Monson says U.S. warships sailed through the area twice in the past few days. Monson said the destroyed USS Van Meer challenged restrictions on an innocent passage in the Paracel Islands. She said these missions demonstrate a commitment to upholding lawful use of the sea guaranteed to all nations. The U.S. regularly angers China by conducting freedom of navigation operations close to the islands in the South China Sea. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed a stopgap bill to avert a government shutdown. The legislation proposes an extension of the temporary federal funding to December the 20th. The resolution passed the Senate hours before its White House approval. The bill funds a 3% pay raise to the military next year's census and keeps public health programs afloat for a month. Democrats and Republicans remain at odds over the funding of Trump's U.S.-Mexico border wall. When the bill runs out, Congress will have to debate and pass fiscal funding for 2020 once again. In Colombia, police have fired tear gas at the protesters, throwing rocks and bottles to disperse the crowd. Thousands of protesters marched through the streets of Bogota and other cities, joining a wave of anti-government demonstrations in South America. The protesters are demanding that President Iván Duque counter rising unemployment, economic reforms, and a deteriorating security situation. Yesterday, authorities closed Colombia's borders ahead of the strike and imposed a curfew. The peaceful demonstration descended into chaos by the end of the day. In a video message, the president has called for peace. Bolivia's Congress will meet today to debate a new election bill proposed by the interim government. Yesterday's meeting was marred by clashes outside Congress as protesters paraded with the coffins of 5 people.
Police fired tear gas at thousands of protesters marching towards La Paz. The demonstrators called the police murderers of innocent people.
We were just here, coming down from El Alto. I want to die. Kill me. I am ready. What are you waiting for?
Interim President Janine Áñez asked Congress to agree on new election dates, along with the creation of a new electoral court. Áñez has also issued a presidential decree granting security forces immunity from prosecution. At least 32 people have been killed in clashes with security forces.
In Serbia, President Aleksandar Vučić has accused Russia of conducting a wide-ranging spy operations in his country. Vučić said Serbia's intelligence agencies have uncovered the operation involving Russian spies and former members of the Serbian military.
Vučić said the National Security Council has discovered a video showing a Russian intelligence officer bribing a Serb in Belgrade. The video shows a Russian man identified as Lieutenant Colonel Georgi Klebin meeting a retired Serbian army officer.
U više navrata
I want to say we have evidence of other members of Russian security services being in contact with members of Serbian military structures, also with video and audio, but we never go public with that.
Vučić said the incident can sour relations between the old allies Serbia and Russia. Moscow and Belgrade have strong political, military, and cultural and economic ties.
Spain's Coast Guard has rescued 79 migrants near the Canary Islands. The Coast Guard said the migrants were stranded at sea for the past 6 days. Spain's Coast Guard took the migrants to the Red Cross Campaign Hospital in the Gran Canaria island port of Arguigan. The Canary Islands is one of the main European destinations for migrants trying to flee North Africa. Spain's Interior Ministry says over 27,000 people have entered Spain illegally by sea and land so far this year. Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa says he will call new parliamentary elections in March following this victory. Speaking at the ministerial swearing-in ceremony in Colombo, Rajapaksa said he will consult people as early as possible for new polls. Rajapaksa wants his cabinet's support to realize the policy pledges that brought him to power. The president appointed a 15-member interim cabinet, including his brother Mahinda Rajapaksa as premier and finance minister. Rajapaksa and allies have 96 lawmakers in the 225-seat parliament, making it hard for them to pass legislation. The opposition of outgoing Premier Ranil Wickremesinghe is also 6 MPs short of a majority. It's time for a short break, but coming up next in the bulletin. A man builds house out of recycled materials. And rating agency says decline in new projects in 5 years. Welcome back. In Mali, the bodies of 13 more soldiers have been found after a military convoy was attacked during an operation in the northeastern town of Tabankot. Officials say the death toll has risen to 43 in the joint operation with forces from Niger. Authorities say the bodies were found by a Malian army patrol in 2 separate locations. Earlier, the military said 30 soldiers and 17 attackers were killed during the clash. Mali's army has now lost more than 100 soldiers in 2 militant attacks in a month. The country has struggled to contain the militant insurgency despite help from African neighbors, the UN and France. An Egyptian man got so sick of finding a suitable place to live in Cairo that he has built his own home on the city's outskirts. What makes his house special is that it is built entirely out of recycled material, and more interestingly, he constructed it without any training as an engineer. More in this report.
Timour Al-Hadidi wanted his own environmental-friendly home since he got married 7 years ago. But Cairo had no such residencies to offer. Eventually, he decided to turn his dream into a reality.
I want to tell the youth that our houses could be built from materials found in the street. The waste is enough to build many houses, and discarded material is thrown away on the streets without people knowing its value.
The building materials cost Hadidi almost nothing, but the skilled labor involved in the project, including electricians and plumbers, came at a cost, and that was $124,000.
The house is built so it works in sync with nature. Wind enters the house from one side and leaves from the other, and the direction of the sunlight is also taken into consideration, so it isn't affected by the heat or cold.
The Egyptian government plans to build tens of thousands of homes in the next few years to address a growing housing crisis. But analysts say the Egyptian government can't afford such a project. However, it seems Timour Al-Hadidi has found the solution to his problems.
Lows in the highs of the business world now. In India, the value of new investment projects in the first half of the current financial year has fallen to a 15-year low. In a report, India's credit rating agency CARE said there has been a sustained decline in new projects undertaken in the past 5 years. In the first half of the fiscal year, new private sector investment contracted by 80% compared with 20% growth last year. It revealed the government's share in new investments declined from over 55% in 2015 to over 35% in 2019. The report said the Indian economy has been going through challenging times in the current year because of a weak investment climate and consumption. The investment rate has declined consistently over the years and remained at 29% of GDP in past 4 years. Stock markets across Europe are trading higher despite the mixed signals surrounding trade discussions between the US and China. Technology and trade-sensitive mining stocks are fueling the gains. London's FTSE 100 index is trading over 1% higher, recovering earlier losses. The CAC 40 in Paris has gained 0.75% ahead of the release of manufacturing and services data. Frankfurt's DAX index is also trading more than 0.5% higher. Official data reveals Germany avoided a recession in the third quarter as GDP expanded by a fraction on the back of 1% increase in exports. In Asia, the Shanghai Composite closed over 0.5% lower over the trade deal concerns. Tokyo Nikkei 225 and Seoul's Kospi picked up a fraction. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.